Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Hamill. I'm the Chief Executive of Belfast Chamber, and you're very welcome to this morning's event. This morning's event is centred on the launch of the results of the latest Belfast Business Survey. Belfast Chamber is very pleased to be able to partner with Belfast City Council to deliver the Belfast Business Survey. This is the second in the series of those surveys, and to join me and say a word of welcome on behalf of the council, we're joined by Kieran Higgins. Kieran is an enterprise and business growth officer at Belfast City Council. Kieran, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Simon, and to all the participants and the panelists, you're all very welcome. Well, I think on behalf of Belfast City Council, we are delighted to partner with Simon and his colleagues and the members of Belfast Chamber for this initiative. We launched it last year, the first Belfast Business Survey. It was around like summer, autumn last year, so I'd be very interested in seeing maybe how things have changed and what developments have taken place in the local economy since. And this survey and this research is very important to the council. It enables us to really get a kind of a broad and representative and current update picture on what's happening out there to local businesses, so that we can, continue to adapt our policies and our business supports to meet the needs of businesses. I'll probably, I won't go on in great detail about all the different services and activities we're involved in, but I do think it's worth mentioning the likes of the Belfast Region City deal that was launched at the end of last year. That's going to lead to considerable investment in capital projects in the city over the year ahead. So there has been challenging times, as we all know, for businesses in the last 6 months, but I do think there is kind of cause for optimism and a lot of initiatives and activities that we're continuing to try and drive to support the city and support local businesses. So I'll be looking forward to getting the results of the survey shortly.
Thank you, Kieran, and thanks to the Belfast City Council for partnering with Belfast Chamber on the Belfast Business Survey. As Kieran said, we're going to hear the results of the latest survey very shortly. After that, we're going to get some analysis with Dr. Karen Bonner, who's a senior economist at the Ulster University's Economic Policy Centre. But the main event is obviously the release of the results of the latest survey. And to help us do that, I'm going to hand over to Kirsty Marshall. Kirsty is an associate director at Mel Research. Mel have carried out the survey on behalf of Belfast City Council and Belfast Chamber. So Kirsty, it's over to you for the results of the latest survey. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Simon and Kieran, for introducing us. Just to apologise, we've got, I think our room's right by something that's making a little bit of noise, so I'll just try and talk a little bit louder so that doesn't distract too much. So if we could get the slides up, that'd be great. Great, thanks. So as Kieran and Simon said, this is the second wave of the research, with the last wave being kind of summertime last year. So it's about a 6-month gap between the two waves. So if you could go on to the next slide, that'd be great. Just to kind of give you a bit of background on who we talked to. So we had 390 businesses who participated in the research. Most of them were micro businesses, with 55% in that category, 31% small businesses, 14 medium to large businesses. And the research was carried out between the 1st of February and finished, I think that's 11th of March. Just can't quite see under the, I don't know if we can read that. So people were mainly trading in Belfast, and with 88% this wave trading in Belfast City, 66% in other parts of Northern Ireland, which is very in line with what we saw last wave. With the kind of the other markets smaller. The main business sector was for the professional, scientific and technical, with arts, entertainment, recreation and other services the second, and accommodation not too far behind. So that just kind of gives you a bit of a broad overview of the type of businesses we talk to. If you could go on to the next slide, that'd be great. So this first slide is looking at turnover, the sales turnover increase that people saw in the past 6 months, and in what they're expected to see in the next 6 months. And we've also got comparisons to last wave in the grey, so we can see how opinions and what people are experiencing has changed in the last 6 months. So if we first look at Belfast, Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, You can see that people's turnover has remained very similar, well, the same as what we saw in the first wave. They've got a little bit more optimism for the next 6 months, with that going up to 60, but it's broadly a stable picture for this market. The market we see the biggest increase is for the Republic of Ireland. So, you know, sales turnover in the past 6 months has increased up to 46%, and they're expecting it to increase in the next 6 months as well, all the way up to 63%. So we're seeing, you know, an increase of 11 and 10% for both of those, what they've experienced and what they're expecting to experience in the next 6 months. When we look at other EU markets, it's not so much of a kind of positive picture. The past 6 months, they've seen a bit of a decline from what we saw in wave 1, but they're expecting the next 6 months not to be too different. So they're more positive about kind of the next, what's coming up in the future. When we look at other overseas markets, again, this was kind of the reverse. So they've had a bit more of a stable picture in the last 6 months, but they're not expecting it to improve with this dropping when we asked them what they expected to happen in the next 6 months. So just to kind of highlight the key findings from this slide, you know, the people trading in the Republic of Ireland are having quite a positive outlook for the future, and have also seen quite positive increases for their sales turnover. But kind of one overall thing to highlight as well is that people are more optimistic about what's going to happen in the next 6 months, with all those bars higher than what happened in the past 6 months if you compare the two charts. So there is kind of a bit of optimism for what they expect to happen for their sales turnover coming up. Oh, just one thing to add as well, if you've got any questions or anything as we go through, if you could just type them in the chat or write them down, and we can discuss them after the slides, that would be great. I forgot to mention that at the start. Okay, so if you could go into the next slide, which looks at profitability. So this kind of follows on from what we saw for sales turnover. The Republic of Ireland having the most positive outlook. They've seen profitability increase in the past 6 months more than we saw in the first wave, and they're expecting it to increase in the coming 6 months as well. It's quite a stable picture in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and the rest of the UK. Similar levels seen to wave 1 for both the past 6 months and the coming 6 months. And for other EU markets and for other overseas markets, there's a slight decline. I mean, it's 1 or 2%. So on these base sizes, that's a stable picture for both what happened in the past 6 months and the next 6 months. We do see that optimism again, with profitability expected in the next 6 months higher than what they experienced in the past 6 months. So again, there's that positive outlook for their businesses coming up. So if we move on to the next slide. So this slide is kind of where there's some quite stark differences from wave 1. So we asked businesses where they expect their costs to increase over the kind of where they have increased over the last 6 months in both wave 1 and wave 2. And you can see, like, fuel, electricity, that's massively gone up over 30 percentage points between wave 1 and wave 2, with the kind of the cost of living increases that we're all kind of feeling at the moment really hitting businesses. We also see quite a lot of these other business costs increasing. So they've all gone up by some way, apart from paperwork and red tape, which has remained stable. But, you know, all of these costs are being felt by businesses as well. We thought it was interesting, though, that despite all these kind of increase in costs, the level of business debt remains steady, with majority of businesses agreeing with that at 60%. And they're kind of more, I'm trying to think of the right way of saying this, they're more in that group than in the increased group. So those saying that they've increased their level of business debt has declined 12 percentage points from wave 1. So they're either being more cautious and not wanting to invest more and take on business debt, or they don't want to kind of put their businesses in trouble by taking on more business debt, or they don't need to. So there's a few different reasons this could be the case, but we thought it was quite interesting that, you know, that they're just trying to keep their business debt steady and remain, you know, not take on any more of that business debt. Okay, we're right to go on to the next slide. So when we asked them what their main business challenges were, we do see that, we added a new code in wave 2, which was pandemic uncertainty. And this was the main business challenge that people selected in wave 2. So there is still kind of concerns about what they can't control with, not knowing what might come up. There might be new variants, there might be new lockdowns, they don't know. So this is very much still a concern to the businesses in Belfast. When we look in the next few codes, so staff recruitment is still a major business challenge that we saw in wave 1. We do see getting paid on time by customers increasing a little bit as well, and in 3rd place of the main business challenges. But also like retaining employees. So there's this real feeling of staff recruitment and making sure they keep the staff that they've got and keep them happy, coming through on a few different questions that we'll go through coming up as well. One thing to highlight that footfall looks to have improved this wave, with more businesses open, no lockdowns, no threat of lockdowns. When we did this, I think there was a mandate in January to remain at home, but we did this mainly in February and the first half of March, so that was opening up there, and people have been visiting businesses more, it looks like, as well. There's only 5% that reported there's no challenges, so there are things out there that we can help businesses with and support them with, because they've all got different challenges, but there is, just feel like there's very much kind of a staff recruitment, staff retention that it's affecting quite a few of the businesses. Okay, could we go on to the next slide, please? So when we look at the economic, sorry, I got it in my head before trying to say it, prospects in the next 6 months. So this is comparing wave 1 to wave 2 as well. There is the levels of optimism for their own business, the business sector wave, and for Belfast city economy. They've all seen declines in that will get better box. So this is where that kind of levels of optimism we saw a little bit when they were talking about their own business, like lessen a little bit, particularly for the their business sector and the Belfast city economy. We see that the decrease is more there, whereas with their own business, they're more going into the will stay the same box instead of will get better. Whereas we've seen the will get worse box increase for business sector and Belfast city economy wave. So there is a little bit of like, they're not sure what's going to happen as much with the wider business sectors and the economy, but it almost feels like they're more confident in how their own business will be doing. Just also wanted to highlight though, there is more in the will get better box than will get worse, so there is still overall more optimism, but it has lessened a little bit from what we saw in wave 1. Okay, go on to the next slide, that'd be great. So just kind of touching again on the staff and skills that we saw in the business challenges slide that came up earlier, we got some further questions that go into this in more detail. So we did ask people if they thought their staffing levels in the next 6 months would change at all. So are they going to hire staff? Are they going to remain broadly the same, or are they expecting redundancies? So the level of people expecting redundancies is again very low at 5%, with majority of businesses believing things would stay the same. So it does feel quite a stable picture there. People aren't really expecting to hire more staff or make redundancies. It's remaining quite level there. When we asked about what support or training they needed for their workforce, again, it's like job specific skills is the main thing that came out in both waves, with management or leadership skills the second. We see a bit of a decline for commercial skills wave on wave. That's seen a little bit of a decline. Last wave we had IT and digital skills in one code, so we split them out this time. So if you join those two codes together, that's in the 40s, which is in line with what we saw with wave 1. But again, it's that more general IT and digital skills and specialist technical IT and digital skills, the key within the top 5 of key things that they need support or training for their workforce. Okay, right, to go into the next slide. So when we asked about what business advice or support needs they needed, key things again are related to staff on this more general question, with improving staff skills increasing quite a bit from wave 1, so that's gone up 10 percentage points, and also this also recruitment as well, that's increased 13 percentage points. So although they're not planning to hire loads more staff, when they do, they feel like they need a bit of support with that. There's also a bit more of a focus on employee health and well-being. So when they've got their staff, they want to make sure that they're looking after them more. And also this support to recruit apprentices, that's a bit lower down the list, but that has increased 11 percentage points from wave 1. So that's one worth highlighting as well. So, I mean, this question asked about all areas of business support, and it's very much like the staff related ones that have seen the biggest increase and or at the top of the list as well of things they feel they need support on. Right, to go on to the next slide. Okay, so when we asked about barriers to growth for their business, the most frequently cited barrier is the level of demand and sales. So that has declined a little bit from wave 1. But when we look at the code, you know, what was selected second and third, it's again staff related, so availability of professional staff, and that's increased from the level that has kind of hit some of the businesses.
Kirsty, we're having Kirsty, we're just having a difficulty with
10% to 24%.
Kirsty, we're just having a difficulty with your audio at the minute. If you could just perhaps just stop for a second, maybe if you can, you know, if you could take a moment, maybe just to leave and come back in and just start on that barriers to growth slide again, if that would be okay. Apologies, folks. Hopefully we can get this sorted quite quickly.
Leave and come back in. Yep, we can.
We can hear you a little bit better there now. Yeah.
Now, okay.
Yeah,
so I can keep going. Just say again if that happens, and we can just pause.
Or, yeah, we'll just.
Did you hear what we said about this chart? Do you want me to go over this chart again?
If you could, yeah. We'd heard up until about, you know, you were talking about staffing issues, but if you could pick it up from there, that would be great.
Yep. So we just wanted to flag, as well as the staff issues, that the reduction in government supports or grants has seen quite a big uplift from wave 1, with the furlough ending. You know, this has, people are saying that's a barrier to growth as well. So some of the businesses are feeling that. But yes, so the main thing is the level of demand and sales and the availability of both professional and other staff. So can we go on to the next slide? So this question here asks about which areas they've invested in the last 12 months and what areas they're planning to invest in the next 12 months. So the main area that businesses have invested in and are planning to invest in is information technology solutions, both hardware and software, with that being the top answer, with vehicle, plant, equipment or machinery second for have invested in, and business model diversification, changes to the way you operate, coming second for planning to invest in. So, I mean, there's not massive difference between the have invested in and planning to invest in. They're broadly in line. We did ask some follow-up questions. So if a business selected that they've either invested in or are planning to invest in research and development and or innovation solutions, we ask which areas. So we just picked out the top 3 here, that the 3 R&D innovation initiatives they're planning to invest in or have invested in are computer software, training for innovative activities, and internal R&D. With the top 3 net zero carbon initiatives they're planning to invest in or have invested in is increasing recycling, reducing waste outputs, and staff training on sustainability issues. So with those top 2, they're also kind of feeding in a little bit into helping reduce costs a little bit. So they are net zero or zero carbon initiatives, but they will also help the business, you know, maybe save some money as well. So that was just, I thought that was worth noting there. I'd like to go into the next slide. So this last slide is just highlighting neighbourhood issues. So this, we asked about what's a major problem, what's a minor problem, what's not a problem. And the street cleanliness has become less of a major problem and, you know, more of a minor problem. So it's more like people are moving into that minor problem box from both the major and not a problem. The main problem like businesses do have is the car parking, with 26% saying that's a major problem, but that's not changed from wave 1. That's always been a problem there. And you know, antisocial behaviour has moved up a little bit more into a minor problem than not a problem, but it's not kind of a big increase there. So it's in line with what we saw in wave 1 broadly, with the similar issues coming up for businesses here. So if we just go on to the next slide, so these are quite wordy, but they're more for takeaways here, but just kind of summarising some of the key points we've gone through. So what we saw with profitability and turnover for the past 6 months in Belfast and the UK is broadly in line with what we saw in the previous wave, with profitability slightly improving. There is optimism for the next 6 months in this market, with 60% believing turnover will improve in the next 6 months and 46% believing profits will improve in the same period. But the main market where there has been increases and they're expecting increases is the Republic of Ireland, with businesses trading there having more success. I won't go into the figures in more detail, we went through those earlier. But just also highlighting here, the businesses are also more positive about the next 6 months in the Republic of Ireland there. I just said that, but yeah, and with their profits as well. So it's sales, turnover, it's profits for the Republic of Ireland in particular we wanted to highlight here. So the levels of debt businesses have taken on has also seen improvements this wave, with only 27% now saying it's increased, and that's down 12 percentage points from wave 1, and more now in that kind of group saying it's going to remain steady. But with the cost of living increasing, the running costs have already increased for businesses, with fuel, wholesale prices, and the cost of raw material increasing the most. So, you know, this is something we'll keep an eye out for wave 3, but it's likely that businesses are going to have to either increase prices to customers or potentially take on more business debt to manage these rising costs. So if you go on to the last slide. So this next point is more about, you know, the availability of staff remains a barrier for businesses and is more of an issue this wave, with 37% agreeing that the availability of professional staff and 32% agreeing the availability of other staff were some of the top barriers to growth, and they've increased from what we saw last wave as well. So improving staff skills along with recruiting were also top of the list for areas that businesses thought they may require support on in the next 12 months. So, you know, just highlighting that recruiting and upskilling staff are areas where you can support Belfast businesses, or Belfast businesses want support in the future. And just moving on as well to the next point here, that there's still uncertainty on the full impact of COVID-19 will have on businesses. So we saw that 42% agreed this was a key challenge for their business. But there's more optimism for the future seen in the results overall this wave. So looking forward in the next 6 months versus the last 6 months, the scores were overall higher. Just mentioning here as well that the impact of the EU exit seems to be less of a concern, with more now believing there'll be no impact, along with less businesses now believing they will be worse off. So we didn't show this slide, but it's just to kind of reassure people that this is less of a concern now with the EU exit. It's more the pandemic that's front of mind now. Okay, that's the slides we had. So if we've got any questions or anything people want to discuss.
Kirsty, thank you very much. As Kirsty mentioned, if anybody has any questions, there's a question and answer function that's available at the bottom of the page. If anybody wants to ask anything specific about the results, to Kirsty, post them in there, and then we can ask them later on. But before perhaps we do that, we're going to turn to Karen Bonner. Karen is a senior economist at the Ulster University's Economic Policy Centre, and I'm going to ask Karen for your thoughts. I think that what strikes me in particular is it's somewhat unusual, if I could use that, euphemistic to call it unusual, but we have a situation where businesses in Belfast are reporting quite strong growth in terms of their sales, quite strong growth in terms of their profitability, degree of optimism about the future in respect of their sales and their profitability. But then on the flip side of that, then you have these very, not even concerns now, but real life tangible problems with rising costs, particularly around fuel, electricity, but also staff as well. So we're in a, I don't want to call it a unique situation, but we're definitely in a different state of economic circumstances than perhaps we've seen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, yes, we were hoping, I guess, in the first wave that as we were going to come out of the pandemic, and that would kind of see us returning, I guess, to some sort of normality. I guess what maybe none of us had expected was the war in Ukraine to then happen, which has resulted in these huge increases, particularly around fuel and energy. So although we did see cost increases in the previous wave, what we clearly see in this wave is those huge increases around fuel, around raw materials, around supplies, and so on. So yes, so we're still in a very challenging economic condition, or economic set of circumstances, and very challenging trading conditions still for businesses. And as I said, I guess we had hoped by this stage, you know, we would be more in recovery than still trying to battle against some of these increasing costs. So yeah, so I guess on the back of that, actually, there's a lot of positives to take out of this that businesses have, you know, certainly in the local market, they've been able to maintain those increases in sales, and looking forward to the next 6 months, there is optimism that that will increase. It's interesting that the sales to the Republic of Ireland particularly have seen increases, and I guess on the back of Brexit, that in itself kind of ties in with what Kirsty said there at the end about the impact of the EU exit being less of a concern now for businesses, more saying that it's not a big an issue as they perhaps said in the first wave. And I guess in the first wave at that point, we were kind of only 6 months into the new trading arrangements, whereas that has kind of bedded down somewhat at this stage.
Thanks, Karen. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely, we'll come on to the trade issue in a second or two, but, you know, I also wonder, is it, you know, is the optimism reasonably strong without wanting to overstate that? Even though businesses are facing these horrendous increases in cost, the 85% increase in fuel and electricity cost, But that it's almost, the optimism is because of the comparison point with what has been endured over the last couple of years. So the issue around pandemic uncertainty. So whilst in some aspects of like, we've very much moved on from the pandemic, it isn't over, obviously, but there's less visibility, there's less restriction, far fewer restrictions in many cases on businesses, but yet there's that uncertainty at 42% of those. Was for context, the survey was being done back in February. We had just sort of started, we were coming through the Omicron variant. There were still some restrictions even at that stage. So that perhaps explains some of that level, but do you think there's almost a sort of it's the optimism is there, even though the situation is still quite challenging, but there's a more of a predictability perhaps than there was when the survey was done and the sort of 6 months before that?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you think about the wave one, which was last summer. So at that stage, there was still a lot of uncertainty about variants and what would happen about reopening and so on. I guess in February, yes, there is still uncertainty, but that whole lockdown, I think we're hopefully over that. So I think the optimism is kind of around, okay, we're able to sort of put that behind us now. But it's interesting that the 42% that we're still saying that pandemic uncertainty is kind of one of the biggest challenges. And I guess that could also tie into the fact that, yes, there may not be any more lockdowns, but this whole issue around getting people back to the office versus working at home and how all that will kind of pan out for the businesses themselves and how they will manage that. So they are, yes, so I think the optimism is, yes, it's still very challenging, but it was interesting that most of the businesses were more optimistic about their own performance over the next 6 months. And I guess you would naturally be more optimistic because you know more about your own business and how you can manage that than you perhaps would be about the rest of the sector or the wider economy. So it's a positive that there is more optimism, even though it's down slightly on wave one.
Can maybe drill into the issue around labour more generally? So there's clearly issues around costs. So 62% said that they saw an increase from the first wave of the survey in terms of staff cost, issues around supply. So, staff, as Kirsty pointed out, availability of professional and other suitable staff were positions 2 and 3 when asked about barriers for growth. 37% saw staffing as a major challenge. 1 in 3 said that staff retention was a major challenge. So you've got issues with cost, you've got issues with supply. You can then, as Kirsty pointed out, it was an interesting observation around investment, where business were investing. They were investing in skills and they wanted advice and support around skills and staff retention and health and well-being of staff. So there's almost a sense of wanting to hold on to the staff that you have, as well as trying to recruit but having difficulties. So it seems that on the first wave of the survey sort of indicated that there was a growing problem in this area. You can see it at the broad hospitality and tourism sector is the most acutely affected. Around 50% said that they were having difficulties in staff, which certainly backs up what we've heard across the city. There does seem to be a huge, I suppose, reorientation of the labour market in a way that we didn't perhaps expect.
Yes, definitely. I think even throughout the pandemic, the furlough scheme was very successful in allowing businesses to hold on to staff. And I guess when we were kind of trying to work out during the pandemic what would happen, we did expect there to be a lot of unemployment. Now that didn't happen, primarily because of the furlough scheme. And what we're actually seeing now, taking that even further forward, is that unemployment is at one of its lowest rates. So there's a very, very tight labour market in the economy in general. And what that means is there's very little spare capacity. So that's why we're seeing these increases in terms of recruitment issues. Now, they were there before, but I think they've become more acute and right across the piece. So not just hospitality, but right across all sectors. So there's a real difficulty in accessing staff. And I think that's why businesses are now trying to hold on to what they've got, because if you let people go, the chances of being able to recruit 3, 4, 5 months down the line will be even more difficult. So in terms of the investment in skills, we're seeing the increase in advice around apprenticeships and so on. And I think that's businesses recognising that in the absence of being able to get additional people, they will scale up their existing staff. They will look out for their health and well-being, and as you said, just trying to do what they can to hold on to them in the face of these very challenging kind of labour availability.
One thing that I think is quite interesting, and so as we go back a year ago, 6 months ago, we still had a lot of fears about what the long-term impact, short-term impact of the pandemic. Longer term, we feared a lot of job losses, and this is the first survey that's been done since the end of the furlough scheme. Yet when asked, only 5% of businesses were anticipating redundancies in the next 6 months, and over a third said that they were still higher. Even on the debt issue, which was Kirsty pointed out, that there was, that was, whilst there's still clearly a lot of additional debt there, it's sort of stabilized is perhaps the best way to describe that, for some a slight decline. So we've swapped those fears, it seems, for a whole set of different challenges, and perhaps the fears that brings, it hasn't quite worked out the way we thought it might. It's worked out a bit differently, but nonetheless still challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think during the whole pandemic probably didn't pan out as if we might have guessed, but I think a lot of that was, the government were very quick to put in supports, and, we do recognise that they were successful. But yes, so the whole different set of challenges now, and as the costs one, I think, and the costs right across the piece, your survey showed that all costs were up. I think it was except paperwork, but it was quite stable. So yes, so lots of challenges around costs and this labour market issue at the same time. And labour in itself, will be a large cost for a business. But as I said, people are holding on to their staff. They're not planning to make redundancies. And I think it's for that very issue that if you do, and you need to recruit further down the line, it's going to be very difficult to try and get staff. In terms of the debt, I think, yes, there was a lot of loans taken out during the pandemic, the B-bills and the C-bills schemes. And obviously they've ended, so that you would have naturally expected there to be a drop in terms of the increase in debt. I think, again, debt, it's another cost that has to be serviced. So if businesses can try and absorb the costs, or if pass them on to customers, it's probably preferable than, taking on more loans which have to be serviced. So, yeah.
Just a couple of final points, Karen. One is around, I suppose it's related to costs, and it's around investments. And there's a question asked about investment in sustainability and reaching sort of net zero targets. And it's interesting that the things that were at the top of that list were things that were, yes, good for the environment, but also good for the business's bottom line. So investing in more recycling and better waste management, things like that. There's still that huge amount of investment in IT. I can get your thoughts perhaps on that as a reflection of all businesses, really, no matter what sector they're involved in, becoming much more tech savvy and more online orientated. And again, that as a driver of efficiency within a business, but also reaching out to new customers potentially too.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think this it was accelerated by the pandemic, where businesses had to quite often think of new alternative ways of reaching customers when they couldn't do it kind of face-to-face or via their normal channels. So we're seeing that continuing. Again, I guess this idea of the working from home and the hybrid models of some days in the office, some days at home, will also tie into that needing to keep investing in IT hardware and software to enable that to happen. So I definitely think the pandemic, as I said, accelerated a lot of, we were expecting businesses to transition to more online or digital over time, but it was speeded up by the pandemic. And I think businesses have recognised the benefits of a lot of that. So a lot of them would have made these kind of changes to their business model, but recognised that it might be worth, keeping that up for alternative revenue streams or whatever it may be. But yes, so the investment in IT isn't surprising. In terms of the investment around the green kind of initiatives, the recycling and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can see for businesses it is about reducing costs. And I guess, if your costs right across have increased, but you can make savings elsewhere, it makes sense that if you can also address climate issues by, reducing waste and so on, you're kind of killing two birds with one stone, as it were. So it makes sense that, again, that where they were focusing on in terms of these climate-related changes, that they are cost reductions for the business. I think given what businesses have been through in the last couple of years, it would be difficult for them to prioritise some of the other climate-related issues of the movement to net zero. I think naturally that would be a lower priority just because of what we've been through. So maybe sort of in future when things settle down, you might see that becoming more of a priority for businesses.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, and leads nicely into the last thing I wanted to cover, which is that sort of not quite a league table, but what is a massive challenge and a big challenge for business today may not be what is the one in 6 months' time, and we've had a heck of a lot to deal with over the last period. And one that almost sort of seems to have receded is Brexit, and that's not to underplay the different challenges that has presented over a period of time and still does for businesses. But it's at that point around, we've seen, if it'll be interesting to see in future waves if this happens. There's a big increase and an expectation of a big increase of sales to the Republic of Ireland, and steady sales to GB. Anthony Swords is asking a question, so Kirsty, after get your thoughts, Karen, on that. Your thoughts on whether that's sort of a reorientation of trade, whether it's kind of less of a concern overall, whether it's just receded as a concern, or whether it's actually a reflection of just businesses taking advantage of the protocol and using it to sell into the Republic of Ireland, and perhaps taking advantage of that status that businesses in Belfast enjoy.
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of all of those things that you said. So I think it was notable that, yes, businesses selling to the Republic had seen more increases in turnover, and their expectations to increase were also higher than for sales to other markets. I did notice as well, though, that sales to other EU markets weren't, they had kind of declined somewhat, or the expectations weren't as high. So I wonder if there is a reorientation. So still selling into the EU, but obviously it would be cheaper to sell into your closest EU market, and particularly if you're selling into the Republic, you only have, not only, but you don't have air and sea costs, it's land transport, so it's not maybe as expensive. But yeah, I think as well the opportunities around the protocol definitely are I would imagine are a factor in that. Particularly as we saw in the kind of the wider UK or the local Northern Ireland market, the sales were quite static. So it definitely seems that there's a recognition of maybe opportunities, and maybe for those who are selling for the first time, going to your closest EU market. The question around the EU exit, as I mentioned earlier, fewer businesses are saying that it's a challenge or that they'd be worse off. And that does tie in with other research as well. So it suggests, the businesses, the first year was obviously always going to be a tricky one to get used to the new procedures, the costs and so on. But maybe now they're recognising that the opportunities perhaps outweigh some of the additional costs that have been incurred. So I think that's quite encouraging that it isn't still as major a problem as we saw in the first wave.
Yeah, you're right. It could be not so much that those fears are being worse off of they're moved backwards, and perhaps a compensation and by doing things slightly differently. Karen, thank you for your time, your thoughts. That's really appreciated. Thank you for that. And Kirsty, there was a question, related question to the last point from Anthony Soares around, I suppose, the flip side of people or businesses in Northern Ireland perhaps trading more south, and it was around that sort of displacement of, there was a steadiness of sales to the rest of Northern Ireland and over into GB. Any evidence, any pickup in the survey of issues or problems in selling into GB as opposed and contrasting with the ease of selling into EU?
Yeah, so we didn't ask any questions around difficulties, so that's maybe something we can pick up for the next wave, maybe dig into that in more detail. But it was, you know, the specific questions didn't really cover that, unfortunately.
That's okay. Thank you for that. It's perhaps something that we can look into more as it settles down a bit more, just to get a handle on what the long-term impact is. But Kirsty, thank you very much. Ian, finally, I'm just going to go finally back to you, Karen, for any thoughts from you. There's a question from Les Hume about the city deal and movement on that. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to give any specifics around when those projects that you mentioned earlier are going to move forward. Although obviously we're looking for them to move over the next period and bring the benefits that they are going to. But also maybe you want to touch on some of there was quite a lot of areas there where businesses in the city were looking for advice or support, and perhaps you can maybe outline some of the help that the council might be able to offer businesses who are listening in.
Sure, yeah. Well, in terms of city deal, I mean, that was signed off end of December, and it's like a 10-year initiative. So it will be the different projects and then pillars under that will be moving along now. So I would say to the person who had that query, you know, if they want to kind of contact me directly, or I can forward details on some of my colleagues who are working on specific projects around that. Yeah, for me, I think that even the discussion you just had there with Karen, some of the big takeaways are around recruitment, you know, and training for staff. So the council, like, you know, we have a team here, employability and skills team, and they are interested in supporting both like employers to recruit and to train up staff, but also to help, you know, the local citizens in Belfast to upskill and to take these opportunities. Now we've got to that stage where there is very low unemployment, so you know, we're trying to kind of address like labor shortages. So we have like business academies around, like, you know, professional driving, hospitality, social care, but also we've launched new ones in business services and that, and, you know, in terms of different kind of like different business sectors, trying to address those kind of shortages, you know. So I would encourage, like, certainly I'll be feeding back the research and the information that we've got from this survey to my colleagues there, you know, but it's also something that we're very much open to hearing from employers, you know, and through obviously representative bodies like with yourselves, Simon, you know, getting that feedback in so that business can help shape and maybe co-design programs and interventions that, you know, benefits their own kind of particular specific sector, you know. And the council then is delivering on the local Belfast labour market partnership. I'd also say as well just that we are, well, I kind of referenced there, we're very much focused on inclusive growth. So we do offer programs and supports to assist or encourage female entrepreneurship and supports for students and also for the social economy. So there's a recognition, you know, that there's maybe kind of underrepresented groups out there in the economy, and we want to try and support them and give them opportunities, you know. And so I think, and sorry, another thing that I noticed from the survey was that appetite among businesses for investment in the green and net carbon or carbon zero agenda. And again, that's something we're looking at to kind of keep building into our programs and to react to that kind of need from businesses and support them. You know, so I think, yeah, certainly from the employability and skills point of view, that's something that we'll be continuing to kind of try to react to this kind of information and support businesses on, you know. And yeah, I suppose one thing before we finish up, I just thought I'd mention as well, I know it's there's only maybe a day left, but I'm not going to miss an opportunity to do a quick advertisement. We have our Belfast Business Awards closing tomorrow, the 27th at lunchtime. So if there's anyone on the call there who's got a business idea or maybe knows anyone who has has a business idea, you can win £2,500. So I'd encourage them to maybe to go for that as well.
Very good. And I can't then let that go without mentioning the Belfast Chamber Business Award, sponsored by Bank of Ireland, which we launched recently. And you go to the Belfast Chamber website and enter one of the 21 different categories there, and the award winners being announced in October. But no prize of £2,500 associated with those, so but they have a lot of adherence as well. See if there's an opportunity there for you and your business. But that leaves it to me just to say thank you, and say thank you to everybody who took part in this possible. I want to thank Kieran and the council for their ongoing partnership in delivering Belfast Business Survey. And it's a valuable, and hopefully will prove to be an increasingly valuable resource as it shines a light in some of those challenges and indeed opportunities that businesses in Belfast face. Can I thank Kirsty, David, and the team at Mel Research for the work to put this together. It's a big undertaking, and we thank you for your efforts in doing that and highlighting the key findings this morning. I thank Karen again for her analysis. I thank Podrick and Band Events for helping to make this morning possible. And then finally, thank everybody for your attendance. Greatly appreciated. And also, when you're on belfastchamber.com looking at our awards, you can look at some of our future events as well, and hopefully register and perhaps see it, some of those in the not too distant future. So once again, just thank you to everybody, and you all have a good remainder of the day. Thank you.
Simon, just to say as well, we're going to be posting up the report on your website, isn't it?
Of course. So we've the report, absolutely, very good point, Karen. And so we're on our website later on today. You'll see the full report and some of those results that Kirsty highlighted earlier. But we'll see them in a little bit more detail and study them and use them in whatever way you wish. So Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.